Good evening and welcome to the City of Warrenville Public Works and Infrastructure Committee of the Whole. Today is Monday, June 10th, 2019. Can I please have a roll call?
Alderman Ashour.
Here.
Alderman Berry.
Here.
Alderman Bevere.
Here.
Alderman Davalos.
Here.
Alderman Goodman.
Here.
Alderman Krischel.
Here.
Alderman Widener.
Here.
And Alderman Wilson is excused.
Okay, and if you would all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is citizens' comments, and I know we have quite a few citizens here today from River Oaks, and River Oaks discussion is the first item on the business of the meeting. I'm wondering if most of you would like to hold your comments until we actually talk about that item. That would probably be the best, because you can, we would like to do a little bit of a presentation first. If you would like to make a comment, we would ask you to please fill out a form there in the entryway and turn that into the city clerk before you get up. Oh, okay. And the staff and the city attorney Adams will have a short discussion, and then we'll get into the comments by those people who have signed up. If you haven't signed up, either way, when you get up, you really need to give us your name and your address, because it has to go into the minutes that you've made a comment. Out of respect for everyone's time, please try to avoid repeating the same things. If you agree with the previous speaker, you may simply state that, or let us know if you have a different opinion. If the audience would please be respectful and courteous to everyone here. Applauding and cheering is really kind of frowned upon. And it just makes the meeting go a little bit longer, and it is disrespectful for people who do have a different opinion than your own. And we always do listen to everyone. So thank you. Is there anyone else has any other comments today, if they would like to come forward at this time? Okay. Official and staff comments? Mayor?
I have nothing this evening to add.
Okay. City Administrator?
I have nothing to add tonight.
Okay. Clerk? Nothing, thank you. Okay. Alderman? Alderman Goodman?
I just wanted to tell everybody that today is the 100-year anniversary of Illinois ratifying the 19th Amendment, allowing women to vote. So I want to remind everybody voting is a right, and it's also a privilege and a civic duty. So please, if you're not registered to vote, register to vote. You can update your voter information if you've moved or if your name has changed. You can come to the county clerk's office and take care of that. But just on a day like today, when we've only had the right to vote for women for 100 years, it's a topic that I think is worth some attention. So celebrate the fact that we have the right to vote by using it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Very good. Now we'll get on to the business of the meeting, and obviously the very first item is the discussion of the River Oaks detention pond. We have a Deputy Public Works Director, Phil Kukler, is going to start that off.
Thank you and good evening. Historically out at River Oaks, city staff has responded to and provided assistance in emergency situations where the association has called us out. Typically it's been their detention pond restrictor gets blocked and they're looking for assistance to get that, because that's under feet of water when it's blocked and there's water feet deep in the pond. Most recently just to be clear, staff hasn't done any proactive regular maintenance out in the River Oaks detention pond over the years. We've generally responded when there's an urgent or emergency situation out there. Most recently in 2018, staff was called out 2 different times for blockages in the private detention pond restrictor. And we went out there and assisted them with the understanding that city would be reimbursed for staff's time assisting them removing those blockages. And to date, those invoices have not been paid. The first exhibit I have, since there's been a little bit of discussion about what kind of easement and right-of-way, will hopefully clarify what the difference between an easement and a right-of-way. So typically, right-of-ways, public right-of-ways, are where you'll find streets and sidewalks and city and other utilities. In this exhibit, on the left side of the drawing is Route 59, which is outlined in black. That's a state right-of-way. It's owned by the state of Illinois. The yellow outlined areas within the subdivision are Ridge Drive and River Oaks Drive, which are city right-of-ways within the subdivision. And those are owned and maintained by the city. And the majority of our utilities are out within those, located within those right-of-ways. Easements tend to be areas on private property where a property owner is given the right to someone else to be able to do something on their property, have some use of it under certain conditions. There's usually provisions associated with it. They can be for access, they can be for drainage. In the case of the green outlined areas on this exhibit, which typically are at the rear of properties and so along some side property lines, those are utility easements. And those, mostly what's within those utility easements are private utilities like ComEd or AT&T. There are some city facilities within those utility easements. There's some water main, there's some sanitary sewer in certain areas, and there's also some storm sewer. The blue outlined area is Lot 63, and that's the open space and detention easement or property within the middle of the subdivision. That's got blanket easements over the whole thing for utilities and for drainage and access. And there, in the middle of that is the detention pond. But again, those are private pieces of property where they've given some right to somebody to be able to use that a piece or all of their property for specific reasons. I did mention there are multiple city utilities within some of these easements. I'm going to focus on the storm sewer since that's we're here to talk about drainage. So my next exhibit is, it's a copy of the as-built utility plans. It's basically in white and it's overlaid on an aerial photograph. What you're going to notice is that there's red and blue lines within there that we've used to emphasize where the storm sewers are within the subdivision. The red lines are private storm sewers. And you'll notice the storm sewer that's on the left side of the drawing and the storm sewer that's up on the north side of the drawing, those red lines, are storm sewers that drain private property only. There's rear yards that drain to them, and then the one on the left side does dump into a city storm sewer. The one on the north side, or the top of the drawing, just drains on over land, eventually into the Lot 63. The third red line that's on there, it's actually 2 line segments, is in the middle of the detention pond. There's 2 circles, you'll notice, and those are catch basins, and within those catch basins are restrictors, which a restrictor is a smaller pipe that's placed in a structure that helps to restrict the flow from a detention pond out to where, as it leaves the site, in this case, ultimately to the river. But it's there, it's designed to release the water at a slower rate. It's what causes the water to back up in the pond, and then over a period of a couple of days, it'll release it at a slower rate than it would if you just let it run off into the river. And those 2 line segments and those 2 structures with the restrictors are a critical part of the detention pond itself. The pond could not drain without them. It would not function without those drainage pipes or those structures. So those are a part of the detention pond. And that's the reason those are indicated as private infrastructure. The blue lines are, there's 2 different areas. There's areas that are contained entirely within the city right-of-way. So there's a storm sewer that's in the city right-of-way. It clearly drains, receives drainage from the city right-of-way, and is traveling through the city right-of-way. And then there's blue lines that travel across private property, and those are a little bit less clear as to why those might be city infrastructure. And the one that is the best example of this, especially with the recent storm we had on Memorial Day, is to the bottom left part of the drawing, so it's the southwest corner. There is a blue line that starts in the Route 59 right-of-way and drains through between lots 59 and 60, and those lot numbers are probably pretty hard to read, but and then crosses the River Oaks right-of-way and pavement where it picks up additional drainage, and then heads down into Lot 63 between lots 17 and 18. And what happened on Memorial Day is we had a short but intense rainstorm, which I'm sure everybody that was here remembers, and there were various areas in town, including this one, where water backed up onto the street. In this case, water backed up onto River Oaks Drive, and was across the entire pavement. It also backed up onto Batavia Road at Route 59. And it was across the entire pavement of both legs of Batavia Road. Public Works staff went out. They noted that these areas were flooded, and it's not uncommon during a heavy storm for Batavia Road to flood. After a couple of hours, when it didn't drain down, staff, it was probably closer to dinner time, was out there again looking and realized that there was a blockage in the pipe that actually, it's the pipe segment that runs from River Oaks Drive into Lot 63 between lots 17 and 18. And figured out there's a blockage in there. That evening, we had our Vector truck come out and were able to loosen the blockage up just enough to let the water drain from both Batavia Road and from the River Oaks Drive pavement. So then it was passable and dry by later that evening, maybe about 8:30. But there was still blockage in there, and the pipe, the water had not completely drained from the pipe. So we came out on Tuesday and we investigated with our sewer camera, and then found that there was a tree roots. There's I think a willow tree nearby that's pretty tall, and there was a significant amount of tree roots growing into the storm sewer pipe, which is not uncommon, but it was a big, the fact that it's a 21-inch diameter storm sewer and was completely filled with tree roots is pretty remarkable. So we spent the next 2 days out there with our brook cutters with our Vector truck, and we're cutting the roots. It took just multiple attempts just to cut roots, pull them out, cut roots, pull them out. And the roots are completely removed from that storm sewer now. We are looking into some long-term solution to prevent that from happening at that location again. That might involve lining the pipe. So that's an area where the reason that some of that storm sewer that does go through private property, it affects the drainage of that, and maintenance of that affects the drainage and safety on our street right-of-ways here. So River Oaks Drive is underwater as a result of that. Batavia Road was underwater as a result of that. So our approach is to take, with any storm sewer that drains public right-of-way, we've taken that as our own. That's very consistent methodology with what we use when we're reviewing development still today. It's just one thing we've learned over the years is in recent years, we've been much clearer about what's private versus public on our plats and on bills of sale and things like that. We're much clearer about that. And that's due to older developments where it hasn't been as clear and to everybody involved. There was also been discussion of some sinkholes within the detention pond area. Until very recently, I've been thinking that was over the red lines in the pond. I've learned more recently that it might be over the blue lines in the pond. So staff will get out there and investigate if it is over the storm sewers that we own. We're gonna have to make some corrective measures both within the pipe and possibly on the surface to help get rid of those sinkholes. There's been some discussion of a lot of off-site flow that drains through this pond, which I said, the storm sewer goes as far south as Batavia and 59. That is not uncommon for property that gets developed, or even property that's not developed, to have off-site flow draining through it. And by Illinois drainage law, you're required to accept that flow and pass it through your property. You can't just put up a wall and flood people upstream. So those properties in that off-site area existed before this property was developed in the 80s, and the developer and their engineer designed the site to be able to accommodate those flows draining through their property and out to the river like they did before. So it's very common in Warrenville, it's common in Illinois, it's common all over the place. You have to accept those flows and pass them through your property. With that, I'd ask the attorney to say a couple of things.
Sure. Thank you, Phil. To this point about where water drains and what is the natural flow of water, there is Illinois drainage law that establishes and has established for a long time that the obligation when water's running from upstream to downstream across land, that the downstream, if it's a natural drainage path, the downstream property has an obligation to accept it and to let it move on through. And so I suppose in a perfect world to some developers, they would like to build their subdivisions and put little walls around them and not have to take that water and accept it. But under Illinois law, you can't do that. And in fact, when you look at the public hearing transcripts for when this subdivision was approved, the developer a couple of times makes comments that, yes, we acknowledge that there's water that's going to come from across Route 59 and it's going to come across and we have to take it and handle it and get it to the river. So that was a known thing. It was, that was planned for as part of the design of the subdivision. And really that's consistent with other communities where we work and represent municipalities, that is how it's done. And similarly, the way this subdivision was structured with a common area detention pond is very, very common, where it's a privately owned pond and the facilities, the pipes and restrictors and other drainage equipment that's under the pond is all privately owned by the homeowners association, and it becomes a shared expense of all the owners in that subdivision through their declaration of covenants. It's done pretty much everywhere that we work as municipal attorneys, and in reviewing the documents here in the Country Ridge subdivision, that's exactly what was set up here. And in some cases, in fact, the detention facilities are more elaborate, where there's actual pumps, and so there's electricity or gas bills to pay in addition to pumping and equipment to take care of and maintain. This, I understand, is more of sort of a natural flow downstream. Okay, see, I'm not playing engineer without a license. So this is actually a lower cost than some of the projects that we see where they have to physically pump the water. And that's a bigger expense to homeowners than this kind of an arrangement. And Phil's just talked a little bit about how the property has been maintained and the city's response over the years. There's nothing that I've heard in the description of that would make this the city somehow to have assumed ownership of the pond or ownership of those pipes that Phil's marked in red. There's nothing that would show me under the law that there would be any city obligation. The action to accept something like that would be an action of this body, of the city council. And staff action alone can't amount to an acceptance, and that's pretty well established principle in case law. Also looked at the bill of sale for this from 1989, which you put that in the package, right, Phil? I think. But it does convey to the city certain facilities, but it does not accept detention facilities, and it accepts only facilities that are in the rights-of-way, which, Phil, if you go back to the prior map, where the rights-of-way are shown in yellow, those are the two publicly dedicated streets. There's no other mention of anything else in this subdivision being a right-of-way. So our view is that the pond area, the Lot 63 area that's outlined in blue, is privately owned, it's not publicly owned, and that those facilities have not been deeded or gifted to the city. So I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, just one thing before we get to the comments by the residents that are here from River Oaks. Phil, if you could point out on the map there where these sinkholes are located so that we have a better understanding of that. And also, there was another question. I can't remember what that is at the moment. Go ahead.
So actually, I don't know exactly where the sinkholes are located. I believe, from what I've heard more recently, is that they might be located over the blue line, which I'm going to point to right now.
You know what, not yet, okay. And when you get to your comments, you can sit right here on that, yeah, sit there on that. If anyone else cannot see, if you want to move up over here, it would probably be a lot easier to be able to see this. Okay, so now we'll get to the comments by the residents. Let's, you want to do questions later? Yeah, let's do the comments by the citizens first. Okay, let them do that first. Okay. We have 3 so far, Mr. Bob Bates, Rebecca Christensen, and Susan Price. So if you'd like to come up in that order, but don't forget to say your name and address when you get to the podium. Oh, one more, an Arthur Kramer. I knew that name.
My name is Bob Bates, and I'm at 29W 581 Ridge Drive. And like I mentioned the last time I was here, I didn't know I needed to fill out the form. I apologize. With respect to the easement situation, you know, I understand what you're saying, but guess I questioned some of it based on some of the history that I had with the research that I did, with what I was given by, our folks. And as far as exactly where the sinkholes are, I see them all the time. I know exactly where they are. They're right, nope, they're right here. Okay, is this the main?
You were right the first time.
Okay, these are the two drop zones? Yeah, then they're right here, okay? So, and again, I think what you talked about with lining.
Use the microphone.
I'm sorry, with what you talked about with respect to maybe lining a pipe, that would be perfect, I think. And again, I don't know the technology, I'm not an engineer. All I know is that if we actually got in there as a group together and lined those pipes, there wouldn't be a sinkhole. The other comments that I have with respect to the fact that you said that there wasn't any maintenance done prematurely, it's true. We've only called and you've come. But back in the day when, this was all put together in 1986, we were told, or at least what the records show, is that, but in the design of the design of the storm sewer system, there will be silt traps where the sinkholes, manholes are, and these are cleaned on a regular basis by the city, just as any other development in the city of Warrenville. That's right here. None of that silt was ever cleaned out, which is probably what happened with respect to that pressure built up right here because of all of this. And this, I would like to know where this blue line goes, because from what I can tell, it goes all the way to what used to be the oil change location, because at one point, the guy was dumping oil in, and we found that out in a bad way, because they were not actually getting rid of the oil properly. They're gone now. But that goes all the way back to almost the bank as far as where this is. And what I guess I don't understand with paying taxes for sewers, for all of those folks, and the amount of money that really maybe only needs to be spent on this, I think it's a problem that we're trying to take this and put it all on the River Oaks folks, as far as that goes. Other things, again, I already covered the easement piece. I understand what you're talking about as far as the, gravity with respect to the water, and I understand that. But at one point, last time we were here, you spoke about how they they made decisions to make changes in the sizes of the pipes. I don't know where those were and who made those decisions and who is responsible for the size of those pipes that were put in when, in essence, maybe we didn't need to have larger pipes. And if we're gonna have to pay for the exchange, I think there needs to be some sharing, if at all, with respect to that. And we, when we put the wall in, I actually had the folks that were doing that, they happened to be the people that actually take care of my yard. And we got the wall for a lot cheaper, but I also even had them put in out of our own pockets, all of the boulders that are there to help keep it safe for people. I can say that I've been in that pond, up to here in waders in the ice, cleaning it out myself to take care of and make sure that there's not any lawsuits on us and the city potentially with respect to the freezing and having a child possibly go out there or anybody possibly go out there and drown. And so I'm concerned about that, and the fact that we're, actually having to have this conversation in a city that was, developed around trees. And of course, if we need to get rid of a willow, let's do it all together and take it down and figure out how to make sure that the roots aren't going into the pipes. I mean, I saw what they were pulling out of the pipes. I was blown away. You guys, I hope, have seen all the photos that were done when the pipes were cleaned. It's unbelievable. And I think that same thing should happen. And once it's cleared, if we're able to line the pipes, and I don't know how we do it, that I woke up one day thinking, why don't we just line that? The sinkholes aren't making the pipe drop. All it is putting holes in the top of the pipe. So if we can just come in and actually fill it with some kind of a liner, we should be good. And quite frankly, it's working right now. The whole thing is working very well. If we are told to fix it, I would vote to just leave it alone. It's not broken right now. And we're not gonna pay for something that, as far as I'm concerned, is not broken at this point, especially with what the city has done so far recently. The detention that has happened with this, I'm excited about. It's where I live. I mean, it's Warrenville. It's a great city. They make money. We all share in the, the glory of that. We're not in the red. And I'm excited to live here, and I advertise it all the time. We're in a beautiful community. Let's keep it that way and not have River Oaks be a blemish on the city with respect to a detention pond. It's not a pond. If it were a pond, it'd be a completely different situation. And we, of course, we wouldn't be even having the conversation if it was that. So I'm sure I left stuff out, but that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Christensen, please.
My name is Rebecca Christensen. I live at 2S600 River Oaks Drive. And I guess what I want to say is a little bit of history about the subdivision and the drainage. I've been living there for now 32 years, 31 years, and have been often on the board, done walkthroughs with city officials, et cetera, over the years. First, before I wrote down a couple of things I wanted to say, but in relation to what Mr. Kuchler said with regard, or maybe it was the lawyer, I can't remember which of you, the drainage from the off-site areas into River Oaks. It was mentioned that, yes, that area drained before anything was built there into River Oaks. But I would like to mention that the area of Batavia Road and Route 59 was developed at the same time as River Oaks. So whatever was decided in 1985, there wasn't a shopping center there. So it's a little bit, it's the same amount of water in the same way, it's a little bit, things had changed as things were built in River Oaks and at 59 and Batavia. Now, the other thing is, yes, the detention pond was for draining carefully into the river without a lot of erosion. It was going to hold water from the subdivision. What happened was, as the water was brought in from outside of River Oaks, there was so much of it that things had to be changed. Now, before it was built, they put in larger pipes. That's good. After it was built, one of the problems with any heavy rain was it blew off the manhole covers. The manhole cover, particularly right there. So they were changed to beehive covers. And the beehive covers helped. They didn't blow off as much. There was a geyser that would last for an hour or two after really heavy rain, could get as high as 3 or 4 feet, massive amounts of water. One of the things that became obvious the city took over the storm sewers and the public utilities in 1989, I believe. That was the time. In 1994, it became obvious there was a serious problem that this detention system did not work for River Oaks. Half of River Oaks was the lower half, this area down here, was flooding. The cul-de-sac was flooding in heavy rains. So what the city did was they rerouted that area. So half of River Oaks no longer used the detention area and instead went directly into the river. Between 39 and 40, lots 39 and 40. Oh, okay.
It does come out of that big hole.
Okay. Oh, it does?
Yeah. That way
Oh,
you can talk.
okay. Here is where half of River Oaks now is directed, between lots 39 and 40 into the river directly. That is uncontrolled, and it is a mess. It has taken an area that used to be used as what we called the lower common area. Initially, we actually had annual picnics there. It's a swamp. Even in dry season, they can't be used for anything. That amount of water from River Oaks is going in there directly. So the city started in 1994 to try to change this and stop the flooding. At the same time, the city several times during that period would come out and unclog clogs that occurred right at the first restrictor, right where the blue city pipes, as you're saying, now meet the, what you're claiming is the private pipes. Okay, the private pipes. And right at that restrictor, the city would come out and clean up debris, most of the time, obviously coming from the shopping center. There were a couple of Burger King floods that happened as Burger King debris came in. And that happened off and on, probably a handful of times in the first 10, 15 years. Then, in addition, there was the oil slick in 1994. That was 1995. But then, in addition to that, the red line, the main red line that you're saying is city-owned, the city repairs. And that started in 1995, September of 1995. There were problems with the line itself. Now, one of the problems that occurred was that the flow of water was so great that the restrictor, the city came out and couldn't figure out what had happened. They thought someone had taken the restrictor out. No, the restrictor had been pushed into the red line. And so the city had to come out and repair that. And that had damaged the line, red line, that the city repaired in August 1996. Again, the city, and by the way, the city council in August of 1996, according to the minutes that I went through today from the subdivision, it approved funds to not only extend the drains out between lots 39 and 40 into this, what is now a swamp, but they also approved drains to repair that red line that is what is now, you're saying, is our line. So the city council approved funds, and again, August 1996 was the board meeting where it was discussed. And then basically, we do have a situation where the city has taken care of those lines. They've taken care of the blue and the red. And so much of the problem is just the volume of water that is coming in that is causing damage, is causing restrictors to be pushed. Although I think that the restrictor problem must have finally been solved in 1996, so that's good. But there's been a lot of damage. The city has always taken responsibility. Yes, it has come out and unclogged the drain a handful of times, but that's not the only work that they've done. They've repaired basically, and most of the repairs have been done to the red line and the restrictors in both places. And also, they've also repaired the beehive covers over the drains, the two drains in that red line. So I just wanted to go through a little bit of the history. Okay?
Thank you. Okay, Susan Price? And we have a few other people that had signed up, Linda Saxton and Dana Colombo.
I'm Susan Price. I want to thank you all for giving us this hearing tonight. We are very glad to be able to talk to you all about our concerns. One of the things that I wanted to start with is a misunderstanding that this issue, my address, 2S512 River Oaks, which is this large lot right here. For those of you not familiar with the subdivision, ridge is high ground. This is high ground. On our lot, you start downhill, and this is the lower commons area because this lower circle is in fact lower. The people in those houses, their first floor is on a level with our basement. So, these people have a definite interest in this area draining properly. But what I wanted to start with is, in fact, this current discussion started not with the flooding last summer, last November, but 3 years ago when we noticed around this drain area that the ground had started subsiding and was in fact almost a foot in some places lower than the concrete edge of the drain. And before we went and dumped dirt in there, we wanted to know where that dirt was going. So we asked the city to take some responsibility for checking on this. And they said, no, it's your property, you fill in the holes. And then the next year is when the first sinkhole showed up. And over the course of that summer and the next summer, 2 more showed up. As of this spring, there were a total of 4, right along the line of that pipe. Now, obviously, that dirt had to go somewhere. It leads us to believe that the pipes are cracked and that all of the dirt around the subsidence area, as well as the sinkholes, has been washing away in these cracked pipes. We're not going to redo the landscaping if it's all going to be torn up to get at cracked pipes. So that was where our concern started. We do not debate that we need to be taking wastewater or storm drain water from existing flow. That was never the issue. That, as was pointed out, was part of the original agreement that the developer had with the city, was that water that flowed that direction would continue to flow that direction. However, as Becky pointed out, as we got upstream development with the apartments and the shopping center, there are a couple of ponds in the apartments, but only a couple of very small ditches around the edge of the shopping center. That's a big runoff area. That's a lot of water that is no longer sinking into the ground. It's going through River Oaks. And the reason behind the deeding of what is being quibbled over, whether it's a right-of-way or an easement, is because we had city storm sewers going into our commons area, and the developer turned that subsurface infrastructure over to the city. As Becky has pointed out, for a good 15, maybe 20 years, the city acted as though they had the same understanding we did in coming out and doing maintenance and doing repairs. So we were very surprised over the past 5 years to be told that everything, originally we were being told that everything was ours, which didn't seem reasonable. But as Becky's pointing out, even that main red line has been maintained by the city in the past. I don't want to get into the legal arguments. If there are any questions on that, my husband is acting as our lawyer on this point. And to the question of the invoice not being paid, we never received an invoice until May 26th. An invoice was dated December 7th, but mailed May 22nd to my address personally. Apparently, that was when I spoke before that somebody said, oh, now we have an address for somebody at River Oaks. So that's why it hasn't been paid yet. Thank you for listening.
Hello, I'm Arthur Kramer, 2S451 River Oaks Drive. Since the chart is here. I'm just going to point and go back to the microphone. So a little history, most of which is irrelevant, but just for background, I actually was on the board of Emerald Green back in '88 when Emerald Green had a different problem. Very brief synopsis. The streets were collapsing because the storm sewers were not in fact built to code. Hadn't been to code when they were installed. There was a negotiation with the city. And in the end, they paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring it up to code before, and then deeded the cities, the lights, all the things that you expect your tax dollars to be paid. They just paid cash back then. So that solved their problem. This is a different thing. And thank you for the nice map. It really helps me to see where things are, who's responsible for what. Two quick personal observations, and we have a number of videos if they help the technical staff to see these things. First, I saw water bubbling up the center of the street. When the water was backed up, there was water flowing up out of the middle of the street. Clearly not a good thing. You don't want the streets to collapse because water is flowing up the crack between the various parts of the pavement. That's not a good thing. So I'm glad that the city got out and dealt with this quickly. Second thing I saw was down at the bottom where the water runs out. In the past, we had big problems in the bottom. It cleared really quickly. So I think a lot of good work has been done over the years to clear that out so that it is draining properly at the bottom. It's the top and the common areas where we have an issue. Third observation is indeed, I saw people out in their waders trying to clear this. I didn't see people in the winter, but people have been out there in huge hip boots. I have a real concern for public safety. The citizens are out there with rakes, walking around in stuff they don't know, trying to clear stuff they're not trained to fix. So that's just for your consideration, a concern. The other thing is, having been on the board back then at Emerald Green, which is a condominium where they own the buildings, they used to own the streets, preventative maintenance is critical for these things. You can't just let them go till they collapse. You've got to have a schedule. Emerald Green has a management company because they own the buildings. They're just private people. So they pay a management company to do this. River Oaks is not that sort of place. We pay to have the lawn mowed, and we mostly hope nothing else is a problem. So we don't have a management company. We don't have full-time engineers. And certainly I would feel very uncomfortable as an individual being responsible for the engineering of clearing all that water for the whole shopping center. I don't think we're competent to do that. So whoever is going to do preventative maintenance on that red line that is serving that whole area, I would just suggest to all the people involved, we need guidance from the city Because it's, even if we hired an engineer, that's not our responsibility. We need advice from the city or the county telling us what we need to do. Whoever does that preventative maintenance, it's important that it be done. And it's important that it be done correctly. And certainly the Owners Association is not going to be able to make a good judgment on exactly what needs to be done. So whoever does it, I'll just suggest that we get a schedule for this so we don't have the problems again.
Well, I was going to say something totally different until I heard everybody talk. I'm an original owner in River Oaks, and I worked with the city council with, I don't know if anybody remembers Jim Guston, who used to be inspector and walked the grounds. I was there when Jim took the restrictor out of the sinkhole in the blue line because it was making stuff flood. And I was there when it was put back in by somebody else from the city. So we've had our problems, and we're not adverse to taking care of our own problems. I mean, after all, we had to put in, a $40,000 retaining wall when the timbers rotted and started to fall down. And, we didn't get any help on that. But this is something different. This is different because it's not just our water. If it was just and I know what you're saying about the natural flow, but that really isn't a natural flow anymore, because once the shopping center was built and once the McDonald's went in and all the other things that used to be earth became macadam, all that water came to us. And so you're trying to say that once it goes through the blue line and it hits the red line, now it's our problem? I don't think that's fair, and I really think that you should work with us and help us find a solution. I mean, this is not surprising that this has happened because the subdivision is, 32 years old? And yeah, we've had our problems off and on, but mostly it's worked just fine. It'll fill up, it'll drain out. But this is getting worse. The center restrictor, or the manhole there that used to pop off and then we got it bolted down, it still has garbage in there. I mean, I looked down there myself and there was wrappers, papers, milk, plastic milk cartons, and you can't get to it. And all around it is sinking. The earth is sinking down. So I really would ask this council, the attorneys, to look at this very carefully. I don't know how many other subdivisions in River Oaks have detention ponds. I know, what's up the road from us? Fox Hollow. I know they have one, but I don't know what kind of water goes in there. And another thing too is, you may not know this, but River Oaks used to be a farm. And of course, we're right there by the river. And we've got lots of little feeders, that come through there, which made it a nice farm. So not only do we have the natural flow you're talking about, but we also have all those other feeders that go down into the river. And I do remember Emerald Green being upset with us a couple of times because they said we were flooding them because we were flooding the river, and they were getting a lot of water. So it's not just us. I'm not saying Warrenville was a young city when we moved in, but it was a fairly young city, and we didn't have all the things that we have now, because we're growing, we're more sophisticated, we understand infrastructure better, and we understand that it just can't last for 30 years. It's got to last longer. And I think there's a solution here, and I think together we can find a solution, and we can make sure there's maintenance on that so that anybody that wants to move into River Oaks is going to be glad to move into River Oaks and not say, oh, I'm never moving in there because, they got this terrible water problem. We never dreamed in a million years that we would ever be looking at this type of problem with this water back there. I mean, we called it the River Oaks Lake. It was a joke. But then it would disappear, until the next big rain. And we're okay with that as long as it drains. And that's what we're asking you for. We're asking you to give us a solution that we can work together to take care of this. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Dana Colombo, 2S390 River Oaks Drive. So I just want to comment. So I live at this property right here. The drain that is pictured here is in my backyard. So it's actually, it looks like it's on the property line, but it's actually just a little bit south there in our backyard. I just wanted to give you a picture of how much water we're dealing with. So every time there's a heavy rain, our backyard floods and the water comes to about halfway up the backyard to the house. So a few years ago, we had a very devastating flood in our basement as a result of rain conditions similar to Memorial Day. And what happened, it was actually about 3 months after we moved into the house. So you can imagine we had a basement full of all of the boxes and stuff from moving in. So we had the rain conditions, and there was a river that went next to our house going out to the street. And what happened was the water flowed right into our window wells, broke the windows, and we had waterfall coming into the basement. And the sump pump was working fine. That was not the issue. The issue was it was just too much water flowing. Our suspicion, after looking into the situation and realizing how much water there was, our suspicion was that water was actually coming in from the drain into our backyard. But how could we really prove that suspicion? And we actually did communicate with the city. My mother actually resides with us, and she had a lot of communication trying to get some help with our basement repairs that amounted to about $10,000. We didn't get anywhere from there, so we just kind of let it go. But this last flooding event that happened on Memorial Day, because of the clog that was, let's see here, I'm trying to get my bearings. Because of the clog that was in here with the willow tree in this section, and this is the road here, it made all of that flood up, and we were wading in it, okay? When the rain was actually, when it was pouring rain, our backyard flooded halfway. When the rain stopped, our backyard flooded full way, all the way up to the back door. So that was the message to my family that we indeed are getting water into our backyard from the drain. The drain is putting water into our backyard, that it's not just flowing underneath our yard, but it's actually pouring water into our backyard. It's an unfortunate happenstance that we happen to live in this lot, I understand. But one of my comments, in addition to the comments of my wonderful neighbors, is that we would implore you to stay on top of the maintenance of the drainage system, of the ones that you deem that you're responsible for, because if that blockage was really the reason why maybe it was beginning a few years ago and it just wasn't addressed, and that's why we got a basement flooded, if that happens again, then, you know, just wanted to make that comment. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from River Oaks that would like to make a comment? Okay. Okay, if you would come up to the podium, give us your name and phone number, fill out that form then when you're done, and make sure that you give it to the clerk.
Name and address.
Name and address, not phone number, sorry.
Yeah, my name's Robert Tyler. I live at 2S571 River Oaks Drive. And I moved into the subdivision 2 years ago, and wanted to just say that in the closing on our house, we were given the bylaws of the Homeowners Association. It's very clear that the Homeowners Association is responsible only for the common areas and for those things on the surface. It does not designate that the Homeowners Association of River Oaks has responsibility for maintenance of any drainage whatsoever. Hence, when they rebuilt the wall for the retaining wall, they just rebuilt the retaining wall. They didn't address any drainage issue relative to that. That's not an issue that the River Oaks Improvement Association is responsible for. Now, those bylaws and the Articles of Incorporation were established when the subdivision was established. So when the developer got those bylaws approved, which I understand had to get approved by Warrenville City, they obviously did not envisage that the Homeowners Association would have any responsibility for the drainage within the community. So that was one thing. I mean, when we moved in, that was our understanding. I'd been here for a year, and I foolishly joined the Homeowners Association and did my citizen thing, stepped forward. And I remember this came up at a meeting about the restrictor and the drainage, and how surprised all the directors were that they had referenced this issue to the city, and the city had basically said, ain't our problem, you go for it and you look after it. And it was like, what is going on? And so this is just really a personal anecdote, if you like, that all the folk who were on the Homeowners Association before me, who had lived there for extended years, you've heard some of them lived there for 28, 30 years, were absolutely amazed that suddenly, despite, as Becky gave you, the history of the city coming out and maintaining all of this infrastructure, suddenly has decided, sorry, it's you citizens that are going to have to do it. And it seems very strange. I mean, they were shocked. They couldn't, I remember a number of discussions where we really weren't sure quite what to do because of this sort of turnaround. That what had been our understanding of the relationship with the city suddenly was not an understanding with the city. And I would note, actually, that it's very nice to see these maps, but I think the communication from the city to the Homeowners Association has been very poor. We've had certain references made to legal documents. I don't think any of them have been passed to the Homeowners Association, whereas we have passed many documents to the city justifying why we think that the city has ownership and maintenance responsibility of that infrastructure. But we have not had anything back. And even tonight, it only came to us at the last moment. This was an information meeting and not a decision-making meeting. And it's like, well, there's two parties to this discussion, but it appears that the city is taking almost a big brother approach to it rather than us being citizens together of Warrenville. And I would like to think that we are all citizens together of Warrenville. Just as a note, just as a very logical thought process here, if you look at that map, I'm a little surprised that the city, and this is one thing that convinces me why the city has in the past taken ownership of all the drainage infrastructure. Because if you look at that, the drainage for this whole area all relies upon one pipe that the city now says is not their responsibility. Do you really want that to be the case? Do you really want a backup on pipes in River Oaks to impact 59, Batavia Road, the shopping center, the apartments? I don't think so. And I think that that bolsters the thought, the process, that the city actually took ownership way back at the beginning of the development or at the end of the development of the subdivision, because they would have realized this necessity for the city to have control of the whole system and not leave this one last drainage pipe in the hands of a homeowners association that clearly in our bylaws did not have responsibility for anything underneath the surface of the common areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I remembered my question that I forgot. Phil, where was the work done in the fall of 2018, and what is it that you did at that time, if you could kind of?
It's that first red circle, the upstream restrictor, which I can point to here. right here. So this area flooded because the restrictor in this structure was blocked, and I don't know what it was blocked with, but we had staff go out there, wade into the water with, and use something to loosen the blockage, and the water drained away. Over the winter, I think it was late November, that it was blocked again, but we weren't going out in frigid water to do that, so we had staff pumping the water out of that pond to be able to get it low enough to be able to get in there and loosen that a similar blockage in that same location.
Okay, thank you. Now, Alderman, comments, questions? Alderman Goodman?
I want to just start by asking Phil about some of the poor communication with the residents about this. One thing that I've heard several times from people in River Oaks is that their discussions with the city over the last couple of years about this started off by saying, we don't have an easement to do any work. Then by saying all of the pipes belong to the homeowners. Then by saying most of the pipes belong to the homeowners except the ones with the problems. And now tonight, for the very first time, I'm hearing from you saying that you've actually realized that the sinkholes are over a public pipe. So I think the discussions have been based upon some miscommunications, as a couple of residents mentioned, and maybe some misunderstandings. And so I guess my question for you is not only what happened, but also how can we improve that communication going forward?
The first discussion that Rebecca Christensen, I think, or maybe Susan Price, one of the two of them, had mentioned with the settling around the structure itself, which is a structure that I've maintained, and talking with Christine, we've maintained has been, because it's part of the detention pond, is the homeowners or the ROIA's responsibility. I didn't make reference to any other pipes upstream of that. I didn't pull out a map and look at everything that's in blue on there to say that that's not, but this was, everything I was focused on was related to that, pretty much it's been that structure. There was talk about settlement around that, which there's been blockages at that structure multiple times. And the two times we've been out there to assist in 2018 were all about blockages at that particular structure. I did not know, I didn't have detail about where the sinkholes were, but there was no clarification that there were anywhere else but around that structure. That was where it started, the discussion started. I can't speak to, I don't remember saying, and I don't know if it was Christine or if there's a misunderstanding that way, that the ROA was responsible for all the pipes in the outlot. I don't remember saying that myself. It's possible it's something that either Christine or I said was misunderstood, or maybe there's some miscommunication internally with what I relayed to her and she put out there. But this discussion is, from my perspective, has been about the detention pond itself and what drains the detention pond, not what drains into the detention pond. And so that just might be, again, misunderstanding-wise. I'm an engineer by trade. I understand how these things function better, so maybe that's where I assume too much of my audience knowing a similar level of information that I do, is where I suppose the miscommunication could have been. But my attention has been focused on this drainage system that drains the pond, that the water drains from the pond through a restrictor, ultimately through another restrictor and out to the river. And that's what I've been focused on as being the responsibility of the association.
Okay, and how can we improve the communication going forward?
I think tonight's a good start to that. I mean, as we have discussions about this, whether it be River Oaks or other subdivisions, just making sure we're recognizing our audience and who we're communicating with may not understand the infrastructure the way we do.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit. Two of the biggest maintenance issues that the neighborhood has dealt with in the stormwater recently were the tree roots inside the pipe at the first corner in River Oaks Drive, and the sinkholes that for the last 2 years or so approximately have been along the blue line, sort of going from the middle of the road out to the center of the retention pond. So can you tell me now what the city's maintenance plan will be to deal with those two problems, which are on blue lines and which are on pipes that the city owns and which we do not want to have continuing problems with?
Well, we're gonna, I'm gonna have my staff go out and confirm the locations of the sinkholes. I'm trusting that they are over the blue line as
I've
described.
seen them, that's where they are.
Yeah, and then the next step would be to televise that line all the way out through the blue line to see if there's defective pipe there, because you can line pipe as long as the pipe is still structurally sound and round and everything. If it's collapsed in any way, then we need to get down there and dig it up and replace it. But my solution would be from the roadway down to that point is to line that pipe. We'd have to get some quotes, but that'd be a trenchless technology to be able to get in there without disturbing what is generally, except for where the sinkholes are, a nice lawn area that I don't want to get into with equipment and mess up. So that's what, we were looking at that anyway for the section of pipe that had the blockage in it. We were going to contact a company to come out and advise us on how to, I want to confirm that we can line something that's got root protrusions still into it. I mean, we've cut the roots, but if they're still there and if they somehow push into the liner, I want to make sure the liner is going to be strong enough to hold those back and not be a problem in the future. So we're going to get advice from a contractor on that, but if we're going to be lining that pipe anyway, I would continue lining the next couple of sections to get where the sinkholes are, if that is indeed, if the pipe is allowing soil in, which is a reasonable conclusion based on what I'm hearing, and if it's structurally sound enough and round enough to be able to withstand lining.
Okay, that sounds good, and I would like to ask you, when you're making these decisions and when you are going to be doing work in that area, to please communicate that decision and timing to the homeowners association as you go along a little bit, so that they know what to expect and they know what's going on with that. I think that would help improve the situation all around.
Sure.
Okay, my next question has to do with that little chunk of a red line that goes from Route 59 to the middle of River Oaks Drive. I'm not quite sure, your reasoning when you were talking about which lines were blue and which lines were red had to do with private property ownership and which pipes ran underneath roads. And that seems to me pretty clearly to run partly at the end underneath the road. So what's the rationale for that line being marked as red on this map?
It's draining the west side, the left side toward Route 59 in the backyards of those two lots. That's the area that it's draining. It's draining private property that will drain into the city storm sewer. So that pipe exists to drain private property. It doesn't exist to drain any right-of-way. It's not draining a street right-of-way at all. So that's a piece of, and again, this is consistent with how we treat all subdivisions, but it is a piece of pipe that is there strictly to drain private property.
Okay, so it's not, you're sure that that pipe is not carrying any water that's going across Route 59? Because on your previous map, it certainly looked as if the lines along Route 59 and I guess it's sort of a ditch behind that fence there, goes pretty close to where that line is, and I can't see it very precisely on this map.
If I was designing this and I was going to put a storm sewer to drain Route 59, I would have put up the catch basin out in Route 59 to accept that drainage before it got into private property. Is my position. I wouldn't have water draining into rear yards of single-family homes from Route 59 to get to a structure.
Would you repeat that? Yeah, because one of the homeowners said that the city line is in her yard, so if the blue line.
You know what?
Okay,
You're
people
gonna
at
have
home
to-
can't hear you.
No one at
So if
home
you're
can
on
hear
a
what you're saying,
microphone-
the question.
Yeah,
So-
no, but the question was, I don't remember which person said it, was that I think when Dana spoke, that she mentioned there's a catch basin in her backyard that is one of the blue city lines. It's on route, or it's on lot 60, is her property on the north side of that line. This red line there's no storm sewer upstream of it. There's no storm sewer that comes from 59 to that red line and then continues on. Where Dana's property is, you've got storm sewer that's in the Route 59 right away that then connects into storm sewer that crosses through her property and out to River Oaks Drive and then on into the detention pond.
Do we have a laser pointer that you guys could use to show those? Because we keep talking about a line that's up there and half the people don't know what you're talking about. Either stand up and point to it or show it on the screen with a little arrow or find the laser pointer.
Okay, well, the red line that is up here is the one Alderman Goodman just asked about. The Dana's property is right here, which is lot 60. This is the blue line that is a storm sewer that's along Route 59 that turns and runs through private property, across River Oaks Drive, and on down to the detention pond. Are the two, and this is different than that because there's storm sewer, there's actually a pipe that comes in and connects to this and drains through the property. This is a catch basin right here that drains this area and connects to a public storm sewer in the right-of-way.
And so Phil, if I'm understanding you right, what you're saying is where that red line is built between lots 63 and 4, you wouldn't design it that way today. You would do something to have a pipe come from Route 59.
No, I'm saying if that pipe was designed to take drainage from Route 59, I would extend it out to Route 59 to accept that drainage. I wouldn't have Route 59 drainage cross into private property to drain that. So my assumption, looking at that and where it's placed, is that it's there to drain the backyards.
No.
Did you have another question, Alderman Good?
I mean, I think the city administrator is right, and that doesn't exactly answer my question. But
What was the question again?
the question is, if it goes over part of the road, and if it seems to be within a few feet of on the previous map where you have all the various road easements or whatever, where you have the line that goes from Route 59 pretty close to that, then why is it marked as red?
Okay, the upstream side of that actually accepts the water into it is accepting water from backyards, which are private property. The downstream side, which can connect into a public storm sewer and still be a private storm sewer. I mean, it's private water draining into a private storm sewer that then eventually downstream connects to a public storm sewer. That's still possible. We, even currently in areas that have sump pump issues, we will allow them to connect their private sump pump lines into our public storm sewer. We'll help them connect, actually. They get the line, they get their sump pump line out to the right-of-way line, we'll make that connection for them. So we will, there are private storm sewers or private sump pump lines that connect into public storm sewers all over the place. Just because the downstream side of that, which is not accepting water from anywhere, connects into a public storm sewer doesn't make it a public storm sewer. It's the upstream side where the source of the water is what makes it a private storm sewer.
The source of the water is what makes it a private storm sewer, but the city attorney said that the location of the pipe being under the street was what made it a public
I don't think so.
storm
I think,
sewer.
She didn't say.
She said that in the deed, it was only to do with pipes under public rights-of-way.
I
I
think
believe that's
Administrator Copley
what she
can
said.
answer this a lot easier. He says.
Let me try to, I think we're talking about two overlapping but different things. I think the question Alderman Goodman is asking is, does the pipe extend to the Route 59 right-of-way and drain into the yard, then into our system? The answer is no. The water may flow from 59 into those backyards, then that inlet picks that water up in the private yards and then drains it through that red line to the city system. So it's completely, wherever the water comes from to get in their backyards, it's completely private property that it's draining only to get to our system.
Alderman
Okay,
Goodman?
well, I want to let other aldermen ask their questions. Thank you.
Alderman Davalos?
Thank you. So in our packet was referred to that there's over 100 or about 100 other situations in Warrenville where these detention, where these situations occur. And I'm assuming most of them are either businesses or complexes or neighborhoods with homeowners associations or some kind of organization that has to maintain their part of this. And my question is, are there any situations where a public line storm sewer like this goes right into a private one and then on into the river, where it's a direct connect like this, that as the last gentleman who spoke was talking about, it is kind of a critical situation? Yeah, it's an important situation. So I'm wondering if we see that sort of thing anywhere else.
You're correct. There's well over 100 detention ponds in the city, and there's a variety of developments, whether it be commercial, residential, whatever. There's a variety of them, and they have all different sizes, all different types of homeowner associations. I would wager that many of them don't perform a lot of active maintenance on their systems. I mean, look at McDonald's and the shopping center there. That pond backs up all the time. There's a number of them that do. I mean, Emerald Green is one that's active about maintaining their system. So they're all on the board in that regard. I don't know the design of every single pond in town. I don't know. I do know Fox Hollow, for instance, has a similar design to this, where their structures accept the water and then the restrictor is somewhere underneath the ground. But the pipes that are leading to it from the city right-of-ways don't connect to the structure. They discharge on the surface and then run into the structure overland. So instead of all the piping being underground from city storms, we're connecting underground to a structure, which then has another pipe that leaves and goes out to the river in this case, but discharged somewhere else in another case. At Fox Hollow, the city storm sewer discharges on top of the ground right above the structure, and it dumps in and then drains underground through Fox Hollow's system that they own and maintain.
Okay. And my other question is, so some of the issues we've talked about here are actually part of the public storm sewer, and the city's aware of that and handling that. And so I'm imagining the majority of people out there are concerned about the future. One gentleman spoke and said everything's working fine now, but there's always tomorrow. And so I would think that the maintenance of this storm sewer, this private storm sewer, this situation, the red line, is kind of what people are concerned about and what's going to happen there. So in all the work that has been described by the residents here, the city has worked and come in emergencies and done things. Has anybody, to your knowledge, and I don't know if someone out here can speak, has anybody done routine maintenance on these pipes? I mean, who's sort of doing that? Is nobody really, after 30 years, I don't know if it's replacing pipes or parts or restrictors or whatever. It's one thing to clean them out, it's another thing to be responsible to replace them, but the city's never done anything like that, have they?
No, the city's never done any regular maintenance out there, and I would suggest, I don't think anybody's doing any regular maintenance out there. I mean, for starters, of whether it be on a weekly or monthly or some basis, pulling the lid off the frame off the structure, getting down there, cleaning out any garbage or grass clippings or roots or whatever it might be, and making sure the restrictor is clean and clear. And that's something that could be done by a landscaper ultimately. If they're out there mowing the lawn every week or 2 weeks, that's somebody the structure is shallow enough that you can pull the lid off it and actually get down there and just inspect it. If it's all clear, then great. If not, clean up any debris that's built up down there. And it's not to say that stuff won't wash down there during a storm, but regular attention to that to make sure that it's clean is critical.
So at this point, it ultimately drains. I think some of the people talked about that out there. It ultimately.
Yes, and the couple times, I think it was May of last year and also late November of last year, it didn't. There was a blockage that it couldn't drain. Water was feet deep in that pond, and then the structure's a couple of feet deep as well. So there were a couple times where it didn't. I think generally it does drain most of the time. And even after, on Memorial Day, it did drain. The pond drained.
Okay. So in most cases in Warrenville, or maybe all cases in Warrenville, I don't know, I'm asking, is it a homeowners association that takes care of the maintenance? Not necessarily maybe a big emergency that's flooding other parts of the city, but are they generally, and I actually don't know, taking care of these kind of stormwater management, drainage, maintaining these issues within the homeowners association?
I honestly don't know. I would imagine most homeowner associations probably don't have the expertise to look out for this and plan for it, and financially, some do. Some are, have had a good history of doing that and keeping up on maintenance, but I honestly don't know how well they keep up on maintenance. I can't speak like Summer Lakes, which is an older development, how well they maintain their system.
What?
Oh yeah, they've got detention ponds.
So in the legal information from the attorney that was in our packets, the couple letters, I'm sort of getting the idea from that opinion that it is the responsibility, well, this is a big thing, but it is the responsibility of those homeowners associations that we don't have any that have covenants that actually say the city will maintain. Or do we even know that?
I haven't looked at all the covenants of all the developments in town.
Do we have an ordinance that says anything about that?
No, no, not necessarily.
So it would be on this bill of sale sort of thing that was done at the beginning, that we would use as a guide?
Well, there's a declaration of covenants, and I referred to it in my memo, where it does call out the pond and any, I can't remember, there's a couple of terms that go with it, but things that are part of the pond that aren't just the surface. I mean, there's those red lines and the two structures and restrictors are there for the pond and for the pond only. And that pond is there for this development only. The water that is draining from off-site through this development, if this land was undeveloped, there wouldn't be a pond to detain that water. The pond is there for this development. It was designed and built for this development by the developer. Those pipes underneath the pond drain the pond. The city, when there's been a blockage in that pond that's held water back, it hasn't caused water to flood up on River Oaks Drive or at Batavia Road.
Okay, so if those restrictors needed to be replaced, the city's position would probably be that the homeowners association would take care of that.
Yep, that's staff's position.
Thank you.
Administrator Coakley.
Thank you. There was a part of the question I don't think we addressed there from Alderman Davalos. I've been here 21 years. I'm not aware of any private detention areas, certainly not commercial, and not any of the residential, whatever the nature, townhomes, condominiums, single-family homes, where the city has anything in the documents where we're responsible to take care of those. I would also draw attention to the fact there are many of our residents, including myself, originally in River Oaks, now in Westbury Court. I live in a neighborhood with a homeowners association, and there is actual detention that when it was built, we put that in, whether it's Fox Hollow, Summer Lakes, River Oaks, Emerald Green, on and on. All of those associations are ultimately responsible for the maintenance of their detention ponds and systems. The city has traditionally, as we have done with River Oaks, gone out to assist. We'll send an engineer out. We'll send out Public Works if there's really a serious problem. I know they have done that in my neighborhood. Little anecdote, I was just at a graduation party last weekend. I went and looked in our drainage system in the backyard. Our drainage is in the backyards, not in a detention pond. So when they have water problems, it's in their backyards across the street. I ended up in an hour-long discussion with several of my wonderful neighbors about the whole detention system, which is always a great way to spend a party, but that's what I do for a living. So anyway, just to clarify that, it is the private property owners, the homeowners association, or the commercial entities that are responsible ultimately for their maintenance. The point I was drawing to, though, is there are many residents in the center of town, in the south side of town, southwest portion, east side of town, that there are no associations. All those homes were built individually or before drainage laws or what they are. If they have issues on their property, they take care of them. If the water gets out to the street, sometimes we help them with an easement or something, just as our private drainage program we did a year or two ago. They don't have any association to take care of those, so they have to do the improvements on their own property as well. I just think that's relevant. We're looking at citywide. There's 100 some odd ponds across the city. Our city, and it's not uncommon in DuPage County in the metro area, set them up so that they are all privately owned and maintained. Once the city's storm sewer from the streets and the rights-of-way then transmit the water to those ponds. I think Phil is absolutely right, is to my knowledge, you're the engineer, I'm not, but to my knowledge, this is one of the few or only systems where it is all connected by pipe. Usually it dumps out the water and then it goes overland for a ways and then into a drain. So there's actually a visual separation, which is easier. Some of the confusion here has been because of, you get out of the city right away, then there's some blue pipes we take care of, and then there's red pipes in the drainage system they take care of. And it really helped when we were meeting last Friday talking about this. I said, you've got a great map, now color code it a little bit more because it helps all of us non-engineers to understand what's what and who owns what. I hope some of those comments answer some of your questions, but I'm not aware of any time that the city made itself responsible in those agreements to take care of those. But to my knowledge, the city has always gone out and helped whatever neighborhood it was to try to resolve those questions. And I think when we get to the end of this, one of the commitments will be that we'll go out and help, as somebody was asking, help give them some information about how to maintain their part of it. And of course, we have to maintain our part. I really want 2 more seconds here. We've been doing a good job of televising and maintaining our sanitary sewers. We are just getting to doing that with the storm sewers. I think this is a good example of why the upper part of that system got clogged up. And once we get into a regular maintenance program with the new camera, the new equipment we're going to be purchasing, that will help us to maintain that part so we don't cause problems from our end of that system. Thank you.
Alderman Bevere?
Yeah, on the map here, you got that catch basin on Route 59, and then it cuts through these backyards of Lot 59 and 58, or 60 and 59. Is there an easement back there, or is that all on private property that we're cutting through and doing maintenance on that?
There's an easement back there. There's an easement that runs along the back of those property lines along 59, and then there's, I think that's, I don't know if it's 2 5-foot easements that form a 10-foot easement along, no, it's this one, right here. No, right here. I think it's a 10-foot wide easement total that runs along those side property lines between lots 59 and 60.
Okay. Yeah, I know when I was street superintendent, we've done a lot of stuff. Summer Lakes, we rebuilt a manhole off one of their ponds where the flow wasn't all that. And, we've done a couple small things. I'd like to see more data on what every, like Warrenville Lakes, Fox Hollow, what the agreements are with them on the pipes they got there, because this is something that could come back in the future and be a problem for other people. And I know we have the program where we help people with backyard drainage. Now, I don't know if that would qualify for this, where it would pay for half. It's something we got to look at. I mean, we're feeding all the water from the shopping center, and it does go through their pond. I know they maintain the pond, but is the city really, should they get involved with a pipe for the pond? It's got to really be looked at and try to come up with some kind of plan. I know when I worked as street superintendent, we were out there, we unplugged that restrictor several times. We were diving down there, trying to get to it before it got too deep. And we have rotted out a couple other ponds a long time ago, and maybe it wasn't right to do it, I don't know, but that was back in the old days. Tom Fox redid the outflow for the overflow on that whole area. So there's been work done there, and another pipe was put in the lower section by Tom Fox. And so, we need to look at this and figure out what we can do to help these people. I mean, is it really their responsibility or ours? I'd like to know what's going on in a lot of other subdivisions. I know Cantera's probably really got it nailed down on who's in charge of all the ponds out there. But that was a major TIF project, and it was really done, right. But a lot of these old subdivisions in town, Thornwild, there's no retention areas, but they have a lot of backyard drains. We cleaned them out. They were covered with mud at one point, but I don't know. We gotta come up with a plan and keep looking at this. And I don't know what to say about it, but maybe they qualify. Maybe they can get into the backyard thing on this. I just like to see more data and throw this around a little more before we make a decision. Thank you.
I don't think that it would qualify for the private drainage assistance, because that's designed around rear yard nuisance problems that affect 4 properties or more. It doesn't, a detention pond would not fit into that. And it's also not meant for like structural flooding issues. If there was a chronic flooding of a house or something, that wouldn't be appropriate use for that either. Because that was really geared toward, more nuisance issues in rear yards than bigger flooding problems, and certainly not a subdivision detention pond that an association is responsible for.
Alderman Widener?
Yeah, I think I agree with all of what's being said up here. I think communication is going to be of the utmost importance. I think in a lot of ways the city has been very helpful, and it's kind of fallen into a situation where what we've done as a favor is expected to be your job kind of the next time around. And there's 100 or 200 of these situations around town, and they're probably all in the same state, or nearly in the same state of decay. And so for the city to become financially obligated and step in over and over again could end up being quite a financial concern and burden when it might be a homeowners association's responsibility. I think the city always wants to help out as much as possible, and I think Administrator Coakley talked about that we'll be soon in a much better position to be proactive with our inspections, and you know, hopefully we'll be working alongside with some of the homeowners associations to make these determinations of what the inspections turn up as far as what's the city's responsibility, what we need to improve things in our lines, and hopefully homeowners associations will recognize and appreciate what things they might need to do to clear their lines. And I think that you know, could hopefully help and resolve some of these situations moving forward. But you know, drainage has always been an issue in Warrenville, and to have 100 or 200 different, and every one of them's probably a little bit different than each other, is something that's going to be probably we'll see more of in the future. So thank you.
I would just like to say that I've been a resident of Emerald Green for 40 years, and the complex has been there for somewhere between 45 and 50. I was on the board for 5 years at Emerald Green. I lived there in 1988 when the streets were dedicated to the city, and I personally had to pay $800 so that we could get our streets up to code and we would be able to not have a lot of flooding. Right now, I know that the water from the shopping plaza flows through Emerald Green. The water from the apartments flows through Emerald Green. I know where the storm sewers are because I walked them when I was on the board. We do have a management company, but we pay dearly for the management company. That management company is told what to do by our board, and our board is elected by our homeowners. The management company cannot make decisions without the approval of the board. We are a very hands-on group of people there. And we right now are spending at a minimum right now of about $200,000 to replace our retaining wall. And 2 years ago, we came to the city and we said, we have a problem with our detention pond. How can you help us? And they sent us and recommended that we contact the county of DuPage, and we were able to get a grant from the county. And instead of $300,000 to fix our retention pond, we only had to pay $240,000. Now, I don't know what kind of money you pay monthly on your homeowner's fees, but I personally pay $350 a month. And granted, I have a swimming pool, and I have a clubhouse and all those kinds of things. But we have 275 people that live there. And we are hands-on. We are proactive in what we need to have done at that location, because we know that the location is older and it needs attention. And we have always kept up our fees, and we've raised them every single year at a minimum of 8% to make sure that we have enough funds to cover any emergency that we are responsible for. So I know it's difficult for River Oaks to have to go through what they've gone through. It's hard. It's very hard. And it's hard especially when it has to come out of your pocketbook. But as of right now, I know that I cannot agree to helping River Oaks, because once I know that I, as an alderman, agree to help River Oaks, then I would have to agree to help every one of these other 100 homeowners, associations, businesses that have retention or detention areas on their properties. Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
I just want to say that I agree with a lot of the things that Alderman Bevere said. We do have a program in the city, which, as Phil says, was intended for smaller problems than this, but it's called the Private Property Drainage Assistance Program. And the city created it, the city council created it with the purpose of paying public dollars, taxpayer money, to assist with stormwater problems on private property. You know, that program has only been around for a couple of years. It hasn't been used a whole lot. We have a certain amount of money budgeted towards that, and I feel like since we created it, we could create it slightly differently and alter the terms of that program so that it could help with situations like this, since we know that there are so many associations in town and private property owners who aren't in associations who are dealing with these problems. And as I think it was Jim that said, you know, do we really want to have a lot of sort of city water funneling into a private pipe that's broken? That creates problems that we as a public body are going to have to help people deal with, especially when there are emergencies, as Alderman Bevere said, especially when you know, the public works people have the expertise and the tools and the knowledge to help in a situation where people are having problems. You know, we're the city government. This is what we try to do, to help people when they're having problems, especially about municipal issues, which stormwater certainly is. So since we already have this policy in place to spend public dollars for private drainage issues, I think that staff should consider whether and how we could make changes to that existing program that would be useful to our residents. So I would be in favor of that. I would certainly be in favor of a motion to that effect, or if we just want to let staff have some time to think about that and consider it again at a later point. It doesn't sound like there's an emergency situation with the private pipes right now that the staff considers private, and that the staff is going to be dealing with the existing problems of the sinkholes, which are on public pipes, as we all agree. So that gives us time to think about how we can work with this association and other associations in town. I do think that there were a few examples of language which made people maybe more upset in this situation, and which we can correct going forward, like this memo from Phil, which ends with, "City staff does not intend to assist the ROIA with maintenance, repairs, or emergencies in the future." Language like that is a statement that upsets people, and I think very justifiably so. I don't think that saying that we're not here to help you in an emergency is a good thing to do, and I think that's an example of why the communication in this situation created 20 angry people coming to a meeting who felt like they weren't being heard. So hopefully in the future we can do a better job. Thank you.
Alderman Bevere?
Yeah, you know, it'd be nice to, I don't know how much time staff would have for it, but to find out what some of the agreements are with some of these other older, you know, subdivisions in town, just so we can be prepared and deal with this before another pipe breaks, that we know exactly where we stand. So I'd like to see that get put into the works so that we can stay ahead of the game.
Just a few observations. First, thanks to everybody who came and was respectful tonight and got their piece said in a way that we heard you, and we're certainly interested in trying to resolve this problem. This is another one of those, I think, legacy problems that pops up when you're in city government. As your community matures, things that weren't a problem in the past suddenly become problems. Decisions that were made in the past now prove to be maybe not as good as they could have been. And here we are trying to deal with them. So I assure you that we are trying to deal with them, and I assure you that staff is trying to deal with them. Staff has to follow policy as it's given to them. Perhaps you may take issue with how they state that, but the bottom line is staff is not in a position to make a recommendation that goes against current policy. Two things I'm encouraged about tonight. One is the obvious effort that's going to go forward for that short blue line that has the sinkholes and had the tree problem, that the city's going to take care of that and it's going to be fixed. That's encouraging because that clearly was part of the problem. Part of the problem is the responsibility of you folks in finding out how to get regular maintenance to those two restrictors. That's clearly a problem because the city now, as Alderman Widener intimated, is sort of on the hook to help out. We helped out in emergencies, and now there's that expectation that we will do that going forward, when really that should be the responsibility of the homeowners association. That regular cleaning of those restrictors should not be a city responsibility, again, on private property. And that's where all of this becomes a real mess, is what's on private property and what's on public property and what are the responsibilities. So I think one of the things that we can do going forward in terms of communication is to make sure that all of the associations that have the responsibility to own and care for these facilities in town know what their responsibilities are and know what the city's willing to do, or what the city is responsible to do. That would be a good thing to do. So there's an improvement that we can make. And we're looking for ways to improve things. But I think the bottom line is the common practice in our community, in every community, is that these things are, one, they're set up so that they're taken care of by private organizations, not by the community. So that if the city at this point took on the responsibility to fix whatever you need to be fixed and paid for it, that would be an anomaly compared to what we normally do and what communities normally do. So what you're asking is for something that's not common practice, which is not to say that it's wrong or that it won't happen in some iteration, but we're adhering to that as something, this is what is normally done. When it's normally set up, it's set up so that it's privately owned and maintained. And you can find ambiguous language, I guess, in the discussion when this was set up. But again, the final decision was made by the city council, and you have to go by what their decisions are and not by what the discussion at the developmental stage of the project was. But I'm encouraged because clearly you have a problem. We are here to try to help. We intend to do that. There are limitations to what we can do. Again, there's a huge exposure once you start, unless you have a policy, and once you start handing out money to one organization, there's going to be lots of people knocking on your door. I'm sure, win the lottery and let me know how many new friends you have. As soon as there's some money available, people want to participate in that, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly good idea. But we try to run a tight ship. We try to do what we have to do. We try to be helpful, but we try to be also very prudent in how we spend your money and our money. There was talk about maintenance that the city provided for the system that's on private property. Again, my understanding is this was not maintenance, it wasn't regular maintenance, it was emergency help. So clearly there is that will, and Fred knows from the past that when there was a problem, we just stepped up and we took care of it. We'll still try to do that, but we have to keep in mind that sometimes that creates expectations that are unrealistic or that we can't follow up on. So somewhere in there, there's a balance. You're part of the community, you're a valued part of the community, you have a problem, we want to help with that problem, but understand that there are some restrictions as to how we can do that and what we're able to do. But we're certainly willing to talk about it and see how we might improve what's going on for you and for everyone else who has a similar situation in the community.
Administrator Coakley.
Thank you. I think there's several things that we need to be cognizant of. There's immediate issues. The drainage is working well right now. That's most important, so that it flows like it should. But I think fact, I know by tomorrow morning at staff meeting, but before that, our staff can follow up. I think it's, Susan is probably the right person. Susan Price, yes, thank you. Make sure, I know the board members change from time to time, we lose sight of those, so we need to keep up on that, communicate. We'll follow up with you, we're gonna be out there, you'll see us making sure we know where those sinkholes are and some other things, and can communicate about long-term maintenance, about some of the different issues. So there's some immediate things that we can do just to start following up. There's some other things that we've talked about that the city's already working on, looking at how we can line that pipe. You won't see that tomorrow morning, you won't see that this week. We have to make sure it can be done, how it can be done, whether it can be done immediately or in the next year's budget. We don't have those answers yet. So I want to make sure we're clear about what we're talking about committing to. For some of those pipes that are ours and they need to have maintenance, we need to look at them first. So it may be something, well, that we go and are able to look at in the fall, and then perhaps the next year's budget, we could fund them. I'm looking for a head nod or a head shaking from our staff over there because we didn't talk about this ahead of time. So that sounds like that's something reasonable, and we will let you know what we're doing with that. The staff, I'm hearing several aldermen talk about the staff looking at maybe a bigger issue. We can start discussing that, but I would caution that's a much long-term and much bigger program expansion than what we currently have with adding staff and I don't know if it needs more staff, more equipment. You'd be taking on ponds all across the city at that point. I would suggest that's not going to be any kind of a short-term solution. So we shouldn't be looking for that. As part of what's coming up this year, we're just about to, this coming Friday, get our, hopefully some good proposals back for a city services and staffing study, of which maintenance and drainage should be something Public Works can discuss with them and get some input. These are consultants that have experience working or in studies in other communities across the country, and certainly will come in and talk to our staff, our experts, and then help us with recommendations we will bring to the council, and then can get an idea of what kind of things. But I wouldn't want to recommend that we go and start developing a recommendation outside of that whole work, looking at citywide global issues, trying to cost and staff everything we need to do, pull this out at this time and just start working on that separately. So I would certainly, I'll commit to you that we'll have that as part of the study and bring that information back with all of those. We certainly have heard some communication issues. We'll be working on those. I don't want to call out anybody on any part of this whole issue and chastise or otherwise rebuke anyone on any side of the issue about communications. We'll work on those. We certainly can always do a better job. I don't think communications is ever perfect from the city, certainly, or anyone. We can always have improvement. We certainly will work on those. And I assume sometime in the next couple of days, you'll hear from us and we'll be out there to work on those. And I think hopefully that will cover the immediate needs, and then we'll have some work towards longer term things, and we'll communicate. If they're global and citywide, there'll probably be something in a newsletter or on the website. If they're specific to River Oaks, we'll certainly communicate with Susan and through the board. Thank you.
Alderman Ashour.
Whether it's reality or perception, we've had several comments about volume of flow, and all the upstream properties, the commercial areas, all had to meet stormwater management codes. They all are required to have certain size restrictors. It would seem that we should have those cataloged and identified on a GPS, some type of mapping where they can be inspected, and it's an important issue. I mean, if somebody's putting water someplace they shouldn't and of a different volume than they were legally allowed to, there should be some fines associated with that. If there are people in the commercial area that have pulled out restrictors, they don't want to hold their own water, well, then something should be done about it. And if at the very least, we should be inspecting those facilities in some way that makes sure that everybody is doing what they're supposed to.
Thank you. Okay, any other? Alderman Bevere?
Yeah, that's a good comment from Alderman Ashour. I know when Glen Drive had drainage put in, they had to put a restrictor in, and I asked the question, who comes and inspects it? Because the county requires it, and nobody ever answered it, but it would be nice to know if the county does any assistance on restricted ponds, if there's any type of grants that they can do with assistance. So I'd like to see our staff check into that. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, yes, sir. Come to the, you have to come to the microphone. And don't forget your name and address.
My name is Rick Deist. I live at 29W 571 Ridge Drive. Been in Warrenville since '88, in River Oaks since '97. The council was talking about how they help out in emergencies. And when we had 6 feet of water in the retention area, we considered it an emergency, and we got an invoice. What do we do with the invoice?
Okay. Any other comments? All right, that was a information only. Oh, I'm sorry. Come to the microphone.
In there too.
Hi, I'm Jean Kramer. I live at 2 South 451 River Oaks. Just one little additional thing about people in the commercial area. Is there a city code that tells how often they have to clean their parking lot so that there's less refuse coming in through the pipes?
Thank you. Okay. Again, yes, ma'am, one more time.
Just so you understand, our declarations set a limit on what we can charge for assessments. Right now, we assess $180 per year. Our limit per household is $240 per year, and that is in our declarations of the covenants and easements that is registered with the county. So just, we're not allowed to collect a lot of money. So, I mean, it can increase some from 180 per year up to 240 per year, but that's it. So I mean, we're not the same as a lot of other subdivisions.
I know that it's in our covenant that we can charge. And I think that if you change your bylaws and you get your association to agree to that, and the members of your homeowners association, then you might have to change your bylaws, because we've had to do that several times at Emerald Green, where we found something that was outdated. We knew we had to change it. I know that even in Emerald Green, we've had several special assessments. We had to go through and replace all the garage doors. Now, the garage doors in Emerald Green are not our common area. Well, I get to use my garage, but it's not my garage. So I had to pay for a new garage door when they decided that all the garage doors would be changed. So there was a special assessment, and we figured out a payment plan for that kind of special assessment and allowed everybody to pay it off within a certain time frame and not have it as one lump sum. So there's different ways and creative ways that you can do things, hopefully. So thank you all for coming this evening, and thank you for your comments. I know that the board does appreciate everyone showing up. Thank you. Okay, now on to item number 2, consideration of pole attachment license agreement with AT&T. That would be Public Works, Deputy Public Works Director Phil Kukler. Oh, you're all leaving us.
Thank you again. Hopefully this is a little bit shorter discussion. The license agreement that's with the agenda backup materials relates to AT&T's installation of small wireless facilities within the city of Warrenville. Each one of these would still require a permit. but they do anticipate installing several of these over the course of the coming years. So this agreement establishes the terms and conditions that would govern these installations and hopefully streamline this process between the city and AT&T. The city attorney assisted staff with negotiating this agreement with AT&T and is intimately familiar with the agreement. So if you've got any questions, either Barb or I could answer them.
Comments or questions? Okay. Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council approve the pole attachment license agreement with New Singular Wireless PCS LLC and authorize the city administrator to execute it.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Bevere. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Number 3, consideration of a revised stormwater management ordinance. We have Senior Civil Engineer Christine Hocking.
Thank you. A little bit more stormwater for everyone here. The city last adopted the DuPage County Stormwater and Floodplain Ordinance in 2013. The county ordinance is currently under a revision. The reasons for these revisions are the pending FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency flood insurance rate map panels that will become effective on August 1st, 2019 by reference throughout this ordinance. Our ordinance references these firm panels, they're being updated, thus we need to revise the ordinance and adopt new ordinance. Another revision to the ordinance includes modifying a section related to indirect impacts to wetlands. They're allowing some additional H&H hydraulic and hydrologic modeling methodologies that the county uses called FEQ. And then also updating the rainfall statistics that are used to determine the detention basin sizing that are referenced in an article to Bulletin 71. The Illinois State Water Survey will be updating Bulletin 71 later in this year to increase and incorporate more recent rainfall information so that in future developments, the detention ponds are using more recent rainfall than rainfall that was used, prior to 1984. So that's another revision to the ordinance. I've been involved with the municipal engineers meetings at the DuPage County that have been discussing these ordinance revisions. The Stormwater Committee and the County Board both approved the most recent version of the ordinance on May 14th, 2019. As a complete waiver community, we are required to pass an ordinance adopting the updated ordinance prior to August 1st in order to maintain status in the National Flood Insurance Rate Program. This is important because being in the NFIP program allows our residents to obtain flood insurance. So the staff is recommending the City Council pass an ordinance adopting the DuPage County countywide stormwater and floodplain ordinance effective May 14, 2019.
Thank you. Comments and questions? Alderman Goodman?
Yeah, just a couple questions. Do we know how many people in town actually do have flood insurance? Is there any way we would get that data? Do they have to give it to us or tell us about it?
Yes, the state can provide that to us. It's something that has to be requested. It's not public information, so I can obtain that information specifically after this meeting if you would like that, or if the City Council would like that information.
Okay, I would be interested. I think there's a lot of people in town who are concerned about flooding over time, and I think when you talk about things like new rainfall statistics and how that has to be updated quite a bit because climate is changing, and we know that maybe more changes will be needed for this in the future. I don't know how often this tends to be revisited. If it was last done in 2013 and it's already being updated again in 2019, not necessarily the rainfall statistics, but other parts.
Correct. Yeah.
Because it says, you said the rainfall statistics dated back to 1984.
Yeah. In 1980s, I believe it's 84. So it's been a long time since the rainfall has been updated in Illinois, and so that's why they have decided to do. The Illinois State Water Survey has decided to do so.
Okay. Well, I don't know how often they update that, but it's got to be more often than that.
They haven't done it since the 80s, so it's something that we have been using, that rainfall data, so that's why they're doing it now. It's a very involved process to.
Well, then maybe they won't be updating it again soon. It doesn't sound likely. All
Right.
right, then, never mind. I withdraw the second question. Thanks.
Alderman Bevere?
Will this just affect people for the flood insurance, or is this actually going to change the 100-year floodplain? Is it going to move it at all, or will that just stay the same?
So the flood insurance rate maps for Warrenville have not really changed much since the flood insurance rates that are rate maps that are currently effective. They were done in 2004. Those are the ones that are referenced in the current ordinance. There was no new modeling done on the West Branch of the DuPage River as part of this more recent FEMA update. So no, not many. They did some minor revisions due to topographic data, but all in all, not many parcels were affected. There were some parcels or some areas of the city where they incorrectly mapped, like detention ponds, so they took those off of the maps.
Thank you.
Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council adopt the DuPage County countywide stormwater and floodplain ordinance effective May 14th, 2019.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Bevere. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Number 4, consideration of city storm sewer easement through 27W 650 Warrenville Road. Again, Senior Civil Engineer Christine Hocking.
Thank you. Historically, what we call the east side of the city has had issues with drainage, lack of storm sewer systems, et cetera. About, was it 10 years ago, Phil, when Bennis did the study? Maybe 10 or 15 years ago, the city hired Bennis to do a complete drainage analysis, storm sewer study of the east side storm sewer system. In order to implement this study, and as part of the FY20 Public Works program, the Public Works Department will be replacing the most downstream section of this storm sewer. This storm sewer is located north of Warrenville Road, west of Virginia Avenue, within the parcel 27 West 650 Warrenville Road. In order to do the work on this parcel, the city is going to need a temporary construction easement as well as a permanent storm sewer easement. There currently is not a storm sewer easement located on this parcel where the city storm sewer is located. So that is the reason for this request to pass an ordinance approving the easement agreement with the property owners and the attached ordinance in the backup materials.
Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council pass an ordinance approving the easement agreement.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Bevere. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Number 5, informational update on the mosquito abatement program. This would be Management Analyst Justin Miller.
Good evening, Council, and again, thank you. To give some history, at the December 17, 2018 City Council meeting, the city approved a mosquito abatement program limited to the application of larvicide to the city's storm sewer catch basin system. After that was approved in April, staff attended training for the proper handling and safety of those products and received 2 cases of larvicide product from the DuPage County Health Department. In May, staff began applying that product, and at some point we exhausted that supply. Wasn't enough to do the entire city. At that point, about half the community was done. Everything south of Illinois 56 or Butterfield Road was complete. That's about where we are right now. So staff evaluated the cost of additional product, larvicide product, to complete the rest of the city. We looked at the cost of the original product that was supplied to the city from the health department versus the cost of a bacteria-based product, which we had received feedback from a member of the Environmental Advisory Commission that that was a preference because it's more environmentally friendly of a product. After that evaluation was done, staff determined that the bacteria-based product was similar in cost and duration to the original product. So the city's, we purchased additional bacteria-based product. In June, we expect the entire city's storm sewer catch basin system to be completed with the application of larvicide by the end of June. And again, the products that the city chose to use are both effective at neutralizing mosquito larvae until the fall. And again, at this point, there's no additional plans for additional larviciding during the 2019 mosquito season. One product is good for 5 months, the other product is good for 6 months. So it should cover the entire season. And again, I also wanted to bring the council up to speed that we are working on some public information initiatives. We're going to be putting a Facebook post together with this, as well as getting a web page up just explaining what we've been doing in those activities and keeping the public up to speed. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Alderman Davalos?
Thank you. So the bacterial-based product was the one that was mentioned from the EAC?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Jean-
thank you for considering that. You know, we were kind of leaving it to you and all, so thank you, just for considering.
Alderman Widener?
Yes, if you have the opportunity and you haven't already thought of it, if you could include in your public communications information to the homeowners as what they might be able to do in and around their residence to limit the breeding areas for mosquitoes, particularly West Nile virus carrying mosquitoes. I think that would be beneficial to reemphasize with the citizens. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any comments, questions? Okay, that was a informational presentation only. And now we'll go on to number 6, consideration to waive competitive bidding for Fox Hollow Lift Station rehabilitation. Deputy Public Works Director Phil Kukler.
Thank you again. The Fox Hollow Lift Station has pumps that are old and on the verge of failing, so staff budgeted for design engineering last fiscal year and construction this fiscal year for the rehabilitation of that lift station. We based our $125,000 construction budget number on another similar lift station project, which I think was Emerald Green years ago. But the project wasn't as similar as we thought it would be, and that budget number is extremely low. So staff was working with Engineering Enterprises to design this project and get it out to bid as quickly as possible, because we know how critical the pumps were. And as such, we didn't receive their engineer's estimate until we were out to bid, and which was well after the budget was approved. And their engineer's estimate came in at like $700,000, which was way, 6 times as much as what we expected. So since we were already out to bid, we decided to see what the bids would come in at, just to finish that process off. And the low bid was still, it was lower than the engineer's estimate, but it was still just over $500,000. And given the concerns we have with the sewer and water funds and trying to reconvene that EMRP work group, staff was exploring and evaluating different options that would be cheaper this year, but still get the job done. So what we decided to do was we worked with Metropolitan Pump to figure out what needs to be done this year to be able to purchase new pumps and use them in the system as it is now, and upgrade what needs to be upgraded this year to take care of the most critical issues, but not the money we're proposing to spend on these components would be able to be used in the full long-term solution on this. So it's kind of a phased approach. This is phase 1, and then at least a few years in the future, we would be looking at doing phase 2 once we're sure of the cash flow within the sewer and water fund is good. So as part of this next week, what I'm going to also include, assuming council's okay with this tonight, is to reject all the bids that we received for the rehabilitation so we can return their bonds and that type of stuff, and let the contractors know that we're not proceeding with them. But since this purchase is going to be almost $67,000, that exceeds staff's spending authority, so we have to come to council. Metropolitan Pump is our sole provider of equipment for our lift stations, and that's why we need to waive competitive bidding to allow staff to purchase that directly from Metropolitan Pump, and then staff will be installing those components, not a contractor, to save money. So, $67,000 to purchase these components. There's probably less than $10,000 of other purchases we need to make to accompany that, but it's far less than the $125,000 we had budgeted, and certainly way less than spending, just over $500,000 to rehab the whole lift station right now. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Was this this Emerald Green pump was only done within the last 5 years, wasn't it?
I think that it was probably closer to 2012. I started in late 2009, and Mike Smith had worked on that a couple years after I started, so I think it was closer to maybe 2012 or so.
Oh, big difference in price.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think this lift station is a lot deeper than Emerald Green's is, and so I think that's a big part of the price change.
Is this lift station part of that CMRP?
No, it'd be part of the EMRP.
The EMRP?
Yeah.
Same.
Sanitary.
Sanitary.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, sorry.
And so it's in the budget just because it would be time to do it? Is that, or you're having issues with?
No, we were having issues. The two pumps that are there are both on their last legs right now, and our utility supervisors really been pushing to make sure we get this done, which is, again, why I think part of the reason we severely underestimated it is we didn't, usually what we do with projects is we have the engineering done, they give us their estimate, and we use that to help budget. In this case, we were pushing ahead on the design, and it didn't get done fast enough to be able to have a budget number for the budget back 6 months ago or so when we were putting those numbers in.
So do you think that if you spend this $66,000, that it will give us approximately how many extra years before it will have to be replaced?
Oh, it'll give us, it'll give us as long as we need it to, I think. It's the pumps are gonna be brand new and they will survive. We're trying to retrofit the lift station so that I don't wanna get too technical, there's two different, essentially manhole structures in a lift station. And the old design always had two. We're gonna be eliminating one of those, which we did at Emerald Green. So there's only one lift station within one manhole structure for within the lift station. So that's what we do long term. Short term, we're still going to maintain the current setup with the two, and that could survive for quite a while yet.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Goodman?
Yeah, just because I know you don't want to get too technical, but just to sort of follow up on that, you said it's failing and it's in need of replacement, but you think you can, instead of having somebody else do it, you think you can buy parts and have the city workers do some labor to put them in? And can you talk just a little bit more about what the problem is and what expertise is needed by city staff to fix that problem?
So the big problem is the pumps that are down in the lift station. So the reason the lift station is necessary is because at some point, in order to serve all of the area around it, the water flows by gravity to a point that's lower than, you can't continue to flow by gravity, so you have to pump it up to allow it to continue to flow by gravity. In this case, the two pumps that are in this lift station are failing. I don't know how old Foxhole is exactly, but they're as old as a subdivision is, and they're due for replacement, and we've had issues. We had to pull one out and make some minor repairs to it to keep it moving. So that's the main issue, is just driving this right now and driving us to rehab the lift station. The staff we maintain the pumps, we maintain the various components of the lift station now. The work we're doing is shallow enough that if we were doing the deeper part of the lift station, we don't have equipment or training to be able to dig that deep and deal with that. But for the shallower part of the lift station, we're able to dig at that shallower level, and our staff is experienced with the electrical components of it, as well as the pumps and that kind of stuff. So we are purchasing the same pumps we would be purchasing if we did the whole lift station rehabilitation, but we're not abandoning the deeper section or the one manhole. We wouldn't be abandoning the deeper section. We're not abandoning the shallower section of it, but we are making some improvements for safety with a access hatch, which is going to be part of this also, and replacing the pumps primarily and the controls for the lift station, which are in a box that's above ground. The controls right now are below ground, which is part of an issue too.
Okay, so we will expect this to come back again for sort of a phase 2 of dealing with this problem in next year's budget? Or
possibly,
perhaps-
assuming we take care of the MRP concerns, depending on how we project. As part of the MRP work group, we're developing a list of projects that need to be done over several years and trying to prioritize what needs to be done now versus what can wait maybe 5 years or 2 years. Or So that'll be part of our discussions with the MRP work group, so we can see where this fits in. It does not have to absolutely be done next year, the second phase. It could be done 3 years from now or 5 years from now.
Okay, so it's possible that this much cheaper solution will last us a little while.
Yes, absolutely.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Alderman Davalos?
Yeah, I just simply want to say thank you for coming up with a cheaper solution. This is a hot button topic, this water and sewer stuff, so I'm thrilled. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, Alderman Widener?
Yeah, thanks for the revisiting the bids and finding a less expensive solution. With that, I make a motion to recommend the City Council reject all bids received on April 30th, 2019 for the Fox Hollow Lift Station Rehabilitation Project, waive competitive bidding, and approve the purchase of replacement components for the Fox Hollow Lift Station from Metropolitan Pump Company for $66,579.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Widener and a second by Alderman Davalos. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Number 7, this is informational update on the Public Works Department FY 2020 work plan and decision packages. Does anyone have any questions or comments they would like answered at this time? Alderman Goodman?
Yeah, as I was looking through this, there were several things that said no progress that I sort of figured we might have some timeline on. And I wondered if in future work plans where it says things like, prepare bid documents for 2020 program. Obviously, you haven't done that yet, but you might know when you'll be doing that. So instead of no progress, maybe it'll say, we'll do that during the end of the budget year. I mean, I don't know. Just so that we have some more idea of what is actually being worked on and what isn't. There are a few other things that say no progress where I just assume Point Oak Drive, okay, staff has not been spending a significant amount of time on that and doesn't necessarily plan to unless the situation changes with the homeowners and, but the road program, you're gonna be working on, and we know that. So just to make a distinction here so that it's easier to review this and actually figure out what's going on.
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
Very good. And then on to number 8, informational update on public works service levels and staffing study. Questions? Comments by the alderman? Seeing none. There is nothing under miscellaneous, and we have no closed session. And I would only need one more motion. Alderman Goodman?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Bevere. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned, and thank you very much.